In the howling Montana blizzard, Lauren Harper crawls from a wrecked IC truck, blood staining the white ice red, as a little girl's scream pierces the explosion. Who'd guessed this broken-hearted mother was once Delta Force's deadliest killer? A secret from a blood-soaked past in Syria will unravel everything. But can she save the child or lose another innocent life? Subscribe now to uncover this shocking tale. The windshield wipers slashed through the thickening snow, their rhythmic thud a grim metronome against the howling Montana wind. Lauren Harper gripped the steering wheel of the ICE transport truck, her knuckles white beneath cracked leather gloves, as she navigated the icy backroads near the Canadian border. It was March 1, 2025, and the blizzard had turned the forest into a white void, swallowing the headlights' faint beams. Tucked against the dashboard, a faded photo of her son Ethan stared back at her. 8 years old, grinning in his little league uniform, a baseball bat slung over his shoulder. Today was the anniversary of his death, 4 years ago in Syria, and the weight of that memory pressed against her chest like a cold stone. "I'm sorry, kid," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the diesel engine's growl. She'd left Delta Force after that mission, trading tactical vests for a trucker's cap, hoping to bury the past in routine. Tonight, fate had other plans. The cargo hold behind her carried 23 deportees, men, women, and a few kids, bound for the border crossing 20 miles north. Lauren's job was simple: drive, deliver, repeat. She'd done it dozens of times since joining IC, each run a quiet penance for the lives she couldn't save. Her hazel eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, catching the shadowed outlines of her passengers through the reinforced glass. Most sat in silence, resigned to their fate, but one name on the manifest nagged at her: James Carter. The briefing had flagged him as a low-level courier for Red Talon, a Canadian cartel sinking its claws deeper into Montana's borderlands. Nothing special, her supervisor had said, but the way Agent Daniel Brooks lingered on Carter's file during the morning handover stuck with her. She shook it off, chalking it up to exhaustion. The truck rumbled past mile marker 15 when the world exploded. A deafening blast tore through the night, and the vehicle lurched sideways as a grenade detonated under the front axle. Tires screeched against ice, metal groaned, and Lauren's head slammed into the steering wheel as the truck flipped, skidding into a snowbank with a bone-rattling crunch. Pain seared through her skull, blood trickling warm down her forehead, but training kicked in. She clawed at the seatbelt, fingers slippery with sweat and crimson, her breath ragged in the freezing air. The cabin was a tomb of twisted steel, pinning her left leg beneath the dashboard. Through the cracked windshield, shadowed figures emerged from the trees, armed men, moving with purpose, their shouts muffled by the storm. Panic erupted from the cargo hold. "Help us!" a woman cried in Spanish, her voice sharp with terror. Then came a sound that stopped Lauren's heart. A child's scream, high and piercing, cutting through the chaos like a knife. "Mommy!" the little girl wailed, and Lauren's mind flashed to Ethan, his last cry echoing in a Syrian alley as gunfire swallowed him whole. She didn't think, she acted. Gritting her teeth against the pain, she yanked a combat knife from her boot and sliced through the belt, dragging herself free. Her left leg throbbed, a bullet wound from an unseen shooter tearing through her thigh, but she ignored it, crawling toward the door. The passenger window shattered as a rifle butt smashed through, and a gloved hand reached in, unlocking the door from outside. Lauren rolled onto her back, drawing the Glock she wasn't supposed to carry on these runs, a habit from her Delta days she couldn't shake. The door swung open, revealing a man in a black parka, his face half hidden by a balaclava. "Exit the vehicle," he barked, leveling an AR-15 at her chest. "We want Carter. Hand him over, and you walk away." His accent was clipped, Canadian Red Talon, no doubt. Lauren's pulse steadied, her training overriding fear. She recognized the voice's owner from intel briefings, Tommy Russo, second in command of Red Talon's border ops. Before she could respond, a small figure bolted from the cargo hold's emergency hatch. Emily, a 10-year-old with wide, terrified eyes, her dark hair whipping in the wind. "Mommy!" she screamed again, stumbling toward the wreckage. Russo spun, his rifle tracking her, and Lauren's instincts exploded. She lunged from the cabin, tackling Emily to the snow just as a bullet whizzed past, grazing her thigh a second time. Pain flared, but she shielded the girl with her body, rolling them behind the truck's undercarriage. "Stay down!" she hissed, her voice raw. Emily sobbed, clutching Lauren's jacket, her tiny hands trembling. Russo barked orders, and 12 gunmen fanned out, their boots crunching snow as they surrounded the truck. "Last chance, lady," he shouted, his breath fogging in the frigid air. "Carter, or we blow this thing sky high." Lauren's mind raced, cataloging threats. 12 hostiles, assault rifles, a pinned position, and a blizzard cutting visibility to yards. For most ICE drivers, this was a death sentence. For a Delta Force veteran, it was a Tuesday. She tightened her grip on the Glock, her blood staining Emily's coat red, and whispered, "I won't let them take you, kid." She peeked from cover, spotting Russo 20 feet away, his rifle aimed at the cargo hold. With a steadying breath, she fired, a single, precise shot that punched through his shoulder, spinning him into the snow with a howl. The move wasn't lethal. Lauren didn't kill unless she had to, a line she'd drawn after Syria. His men returned fire, bullets pinging off the truck's armored frame, but she'd bought seconds. Dragging Emily back to the cabin, she slammed the door shut, barricading them inside as the storm raged on. Russo's voice roared through the wind, furious and pained. "You're dead, lady. You hear me?" Lauren ignored him, her focus on Emily's tear-streaked face. "You're okay?" she murmured, brushing snow from the girl's hair, her own hands shaking from blood loss. But the gunfire outside intensified, and she knew this was just the beginning. Who was James Carter, and why was Red Talon desperate enough to risk this? The answers were locked in that cargo hold, and Lauren was about to find out, whether she survived the night or not. Snow battered the cracked windshield of the overturned IC truck, the Montana blizzard a relentless shroud around Lauren Harper as she crouched in the wrecked cabin. Her left leg throbbed, blood seeping from the bullet wound in her thigh, soaking through her jeans and pooling on the icy floor. Beside her, Emily clung to her arm, her small body trembling, tears freezing on her cheeks. The gunfire outside had quieted to sporadic bursts, Red Talon's men regrouping after Lauren's shot dropped Tommy Russo. She knew they wouldn't wait long. Russo's howl of pain still echoed in her ears, a promise of vengeance. But right now, her focus wasn't on the cartel. It was on the man they wanted, James Carter. Lauren yanked a first aid kit from under the driver's seat, her hands shaking as she tore open a gauze pad and pressed it to her wound. Pain flared, but she bit it back, her Delta Force training keeping her steady. "Stay close, kid," she murmured to Emily, her voice rough but gentle. The girl nodded, her wide brown eyes locked on Lauren like she was the only anchor in this frozen hell. Lauren's gaze shifted to the cargo hold's reinforced window. 23 silhouettes huddled in the dark, their fear palpable even through the glass. She keyed the internal mic, her tone clipped despite the ache in her chest. James Carter, front and center. Now, a lean figure detached from the group, stepping into the dim light of the hold's emergency LEDs. James Carter was in his 30s, wiry, with sharp gray eyes that didn't flinch under scrutiny. His hands were zip-tied like the others, but his posture screamed defiance, not defeat. Lauren popped the cargo door's manual release, wincing as she climbed out into the snow, Glock raised. "Out here," she ordered, motioning him forward. Carter complied, stepping onto the ice, his breath fogging in the frigid air. The wind whipped his dark hair, but he stood tall, unfazed by the chaos. "You're the reason we're pinned down," Lauren said, her voice cutting through the storm. "Red Talon wants you bad enough to blow this truck to pieces." "Why?" Her finger hovered over the trigger, not trusting him yet. Carter's eyes narrowed, assessing her. Then he spoke, his voice low, steady, with a faint Canadian lilt. "Because I've got something they'll kill to keep buried. 3 years deep cover with Red Talon, Canadian Intelligence Service. I'm not some lowlife courier. I've got dirt on their whole operation. Lauren's grip tightened on the Glock. Dirt? She echoed, skepticism sharpening her tone. What kind of dirt's worth this? She gestured at the bullet-riddled truck, the blood on her leg, the terrified girl beside her. Carter's jaw clenched, and he leaned closer, his words deliberate. Human trafficking, border corruption, names, dates, bank accounts. Red Talon's moving kids and women through Montana into Canada, selling them overseas. I've got proof of payoffs to ICE, local sheriffs, even a U.S. senator. They'll burn this forest down to stop me. The words hit Lauren like a punch, images of Ethan flickering in her mind. His small body crumpled in a Syrian alley, caught in a cartel hit she couldn't stop. Her breath hitched, but she forced it steady. Prove it, she snapped, her voice steel despite the tremor in her chest. Carter smirked faintly, then lifted his foot, shaking off snow to reveal a slit in his boot's heel. Microchip, emergency protocols, standard issue for deep cover. Check it. Lauren hesitated, then knelt, grunting as her wound flared, and pried out a tiny chip, its metallic glint catching the truck's flickering lights. She'd seen these before, CIA-grade tech. He wasn't lying. But then Carter dropped the bomb that shattered her calm. 4 years ago, Syria, he said, his voice softening, almost regretful. I filed a report on a Red Talon cell moving through Damascus. Bad intel got intercepted, my fault, maybe. Civilians got caught in the crossfire. Kids too. Lauren froze, the chip slipping from her fingers into the snow. Her eyes locked on his, rage bubbling up like lava. Ethan? She rasped, the name tearing from her throat. My son, 8 years old, dead because of that hit. You're telling me you were the leak? Carter didn't flinch, but his gaze darkened with something like guilt. I didn't know names, just numbers, collateral stats. If I'd known. He stopped, swallowing hard. Lauren surged forward, slamming the Glock's barrel against his forehead, her finger trembling on the trigger. You didn't know? She snarled, tears streaking her face, freezing as they fell. He was playing catch in an alley when your stats blew him apart. I held him while he bled out. Carter. You don't get to not know. Her voice cracked, the storm swallowing her anguish. Emily gasped, tugging at Lauren's sleeve. Don't kill him, please, the girl sobbed, her small hands wrapping around Lauren's arm. You're good. You saved me. Don't be like them. The plea cut through Lauren's fury, a mirror to the innocence she'd lost with Ethan. She stared into Carter's eyes, seeing not defiance now, but a flicker of remorse. Her chest heaved, the gun steady against his skin, every muscle screaming to pull the trigger. Syria replayed in her head, Ethan's last smile, his broken bat beside him, her failure to protect him. Was this man the key to that pain or just another pawn? Seconds stretched into eternity, the wind howling like a mourner's wail. Finally, Lauren lowered the gun, her arm shaking as she stepped back. You live? She growled, wiping her face with a blood-smeared hand. For now, but you're gonna tell me everything, every name, every deal. If you're lying, I'll bury you myself. Carter nodded, relief flashing across his face, but the tension between them hung heavy, an unspoken debt neither could erase. Outside, Russo's voice cut through the storm again, weaker but venomous. Time's up. Bring Carter out or we torch the truck. Kids and all. Lauren glanced at Emily, then at the huddled figures in the hold. 23 lives, 1 traitor, and a past she couldn't outrun. She holstered the Glock, her decision made, not for Carter, but for the girl clutching her hand. We're not done, she muttered to him, then turned to face the fight ahead, blood and snow mingling under her boots. The wrecked ICE truck lay half-buried in snow, its battered frame groaning under the weight of the Montana blizzard as Lauren Harper braced herself against the cabin wall. Her left shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed her earlier, blood soaking her jacket, while the wound in her thigh pulsed with every heartbeat. Emily clung to her side, her small hands gripping Lauren's arm, her sobs muffled by the howling wind outside. James Carter stood a few feet away, his gray eyes darting between Lauren and the cargo hold where 23 deportees huddled, their faces pressed against the reinforced glass in silent terror. The storm masked Red Talon's movements, but Lauren knew they were out there. Tommy Russo's threats still ringing in her ears. She'd bought time by wounding him, but time was a currency running dry. "We can't stay here," Lauren said, her voice low but firm, cutting through the wind's wail. She adjusted the gauze on her thigh, wincing as fresh blood seeped through, then turned to Carter. "You're with me. We're moving. Find a defensible spot before they regroup." Carter nodded, his jaw tight, the weight of their earlier confrontation hanging unspoken between them. Lauren didn't trust him, not after his confession about Syria, but she needed his intel if they were going to survive. She grabbed a crowbar from the truck's toolkit, popped the cargo door fully open, and waved the deportees out. "Single file, stay low. We're heading east. There's an old warehouse half a mile out." "Move!" The group stumbled into the snow, their breaths fogging in the frigid air as Lauren led them through the trees, her Glock drawn, senses razor-sharp despite the pain. Emily stayed glued to her hip, a tiny shadow in the whiteout, while Carter brought up the rear, his zip-tied hands freed by Lauren's knife minutes earlier. The forest was a maze of pine and ice, the storm reducing visibility to a dozen yards. Lauren's mind raced. Red Talon wouldn't stop with Russo down. They'd call in backups, maybe worse. She needed a stronghold, a plan, anything to keep these people alive. After 20 grueling minutes, the warehouse loomed ahead, a rusted relic of Montana's logging days, its windows shattered, roof sagging under snow. Lauren kicked in the splintered door, ushering the group inside. The interior was a cavern of shadows, littered with broken crates and frozen machinery, but it offered cover. "Spread out, find corners," she ordered, her voice echoing off the metal walls. "Carter with me. Check the perimeter." As the deportees scattered, Emily tugged Lauren's sleeve, her voice trembling. "Are we safe now?" Lauren knelt, brushing snow from the girl's hair. "Not yet, kid, but I'm working on it." Carter returned from scouting, his expression grim. "No back exit, but there's a basement level. Might be a way out if we're cornered." Lauren nodded, then pulled her satellite phone from her pack, dialing Deputy Sarah Mitchell, a local cop she'd met on a prior run. "Sarah, it's Lauren Harper. Ice Transport 647. We're hit, Red Talon. Warehouse off Route 89. Need backup now." Static crackled. Then Sarah's voice broke through, tense but steady. "Copy that, Lauren. I'll grab Trooper Bradley and head your way. ETA 30 minutes. Hang tai." But before Lauren could respond, a new voice cut in. Smooth, cold, and all too familiar. "Not so fast, Harper. You're not slipping away that easy." Lauren's blood ran colder than the storm. Agent Daniel Brooks, her ICE supervisor, his tone dripping with menace. "How?" she started, but Brooks laughed, sharp and cutting. "The girl, Harper. Emily. Check her shoes. Cute little tracker I slipped in at the detention center. Been watching you since mile 1. Lauren's eyes snapped to Emily's boots, dread clawing at her gut. She ripped one off, and there it was, a tiny blinking device nestled in the sole, pulsing like a heartbeat. Emily's face crumpled, tears spilling over. "I didn't know, Miss Lauren. I swear." Lauren pulled her close, stroking her hair, her voice soft despite the fury boiling inside. "It's not your fault, sweetie. He's the monster here." Brooks' voice crackled again. "You've got 10 minutes before my boys light that place up. Hand over Carter, and maybe I let the kid live." The line went dead, and Lauren's world tilted. She smashed the tracker under her heel, but the damage was done. Headlights pierced the blizzard outside, engines roaring as Red Talon's armored SUVs screeched to a halt, disgorging a dozen gunmen. Lauren's mind spun. Sacrifice Carter and a few to save the rest, or fight and risk them all. She rejected the first option. Ethan's death had taught her no life was expendable, but the odds were grim. "Basement now," she barked, shoving Emily toward Carter. The group scrambled down a rickety ladder as gunfire erupted, bullets tearing through the warehouse walls, splintering wood and pinging off steel. Lauren stayed topside, buying time. She rolled behind a crate, firing controlled bursts. 2 shots dropped one gunman, a third winged another. But a sharp pain exploded in her shoulder as a round caught her, spinning her against the wall. Blood sprayed the snow-dusted floor, and she grunted, clutching the wound. Below, screams echoed. 5 deportees, including an older man who'd hesitated, were snatched by Red Talon's men bursting through a side door.
No!
Lauren roared, her voice raw, firing blindly to cover their retreat. She stumbled to the ladder, half falling into the basement as Carter caught her. "They got 5, he said, his face pale. "We're pinned." The deportees huddled in the damp, freezing space, their eyes wide with terror. Emily ran to Lauren, sobbing into her chest.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Lauren held her tight, blood smearing the girl's coat, her own vision blurring from loss. "Not your fault," she gasped, then turned to Carter, fury and desperation warring in her gaze. "You said you had proof. Better be worth it, because I'm not losing more." Above, boots thundered, and Russo's voice, weak but venomous, rang out. "Burn it down if you have to. Just get Carter." Lauren gripped her Glock, her shoulder screaming, her leg barely holding her up. She'd promised Emily safety, promised herself no more failures like Syria. But as the warehouse trembled under Red Talon's assault, that promise felt like a lie, and the fight was only beginning. The basement of the old Montana warehouse was a crypt of cold concrete and shadows, the air thick with dampness and the faint tang of rust. Lauren Harper slumped against a crumbling wall, her left shoulder a throbbing mess of blood and torn muscle, her thigh wound seeping through the soaked gauze. Emily pressed close beside her, her small frame shivering in the icy dark, her tear-streaked face buried in Lauren's jacket. Above, the warehouse shuddered as Red Talon's gunfire tore through the upper level, the muffled shouts of Tommy Russo and his men echoing down the rickety ladder. 5 deportees were gone, snatched in the chaos, and the sting of that loss burned deeper than the bullets in Lauren's flesh. She clenched her jaw, forcing her breathing steady, her Delta Force instincts battling the exhaustion threatening to drag her under. James Carter knelt nearby, his sharp gray eyes scanning the huddled group of 18 remaining deportees. Men, women, and a few kids, their faces etched with terror. "They'll find this level soon," he said, his voice low, urgent. "We've got minutes, maybe less." Lauren nodded, her hand tightening around the Glock, its magazine down to half. She'd bought them a sliver of time by holding the line upstairs. But Red Talon wasn't playing games anymore. Agent Daniel Brooks' betrayal, the tracker in Emily's shoe, had turned this into a hunt, and they were the prey. "We need an out," Lauren rasped, pushing herself upright despite the dizziness spinning her vision. She scanned the basement, a maze of rusted pipes, broken crates, and a narrow tunnel at the far end, barely visible in the dim light filtering from a cracked skylight. That tunnel, where's it led? Carter followed her gaze, then shrugged. Could be a drainage line, maybe an old service route. Either way, it's our shot. Lauren turned to the group, her voice cutting through their murmurs. "Listen up, pair off, stay quiet. We're moving through that tunnel. No one gets left behind, understood?" As the deportees paired up, Emily tugged Lauren's sleeve, her voice a whisper. "You're hurt bad, Miss Lauren. What if you can't?" Lauren cut her off with a faint, pained smile, brushing snow-damp hair from the girl's forehead. "I've been worse, kid. Stick with me and we'll make it." But her eyes betrayed the lie. Blood loss was sapping her strength, and every step felt like wading through mud. She caught Carter watching, his expression unreadable, and snapped, "Move, Carter. You're on point." The tunnel was a tight squeeze, its walls slick with ice and mold, the air bitter with stagnation. Lauren limped behind Carter, Emily's hand in hers, the group trailing in a ragged line. The storm's roar faded as they descended, replaced by the drip of melting snow and their own ragged breaths. After what felt like miles but was likely only a quarter, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. a forgotten maintenance hub, its rusted lockers and cracked benches a relic of better days. And there, leaning against a wall with a shotgun propped beside him, stood an old man in a weathered coat, his grizzled face lit by a flickering lantern. "Who the hell are you?" Lauren demanded, raising her Glock despite the tremble in her arm. The man held up a hand, his voice gravelly but calm. "Name's Hank, old man Hank to most. Run a rest stop a mile west. Heard the gunfire. Figured someone was in a bind." His eyes flicked to her wounds, then to the group. "Red Talon, I'm guessing?" Lauren lowered the gun slightly, sizing him up. "Yeah, you got a problem with that?" Hank snorted, a bitter edge to it. "Lost my boy to those bastards 3 years back. Marine got too close to their smuggling lines. I'd sooner spit on them than shake their hands." The confession hit Lauren like a fist, her mind flashing to Ethan's broken body in Syria. She swallowed hard, then nodded. "We need a way out, Hank. They're on our tail." Hank gestured to a battered Ford van parked near a service hatch. "Gassed up, seats 20 if you pack tight. Ain't pretty, but it'll roll." Lauren exhaled, relief warring with suspicion. "Why help us?" Hank's gaze hardened, locking on hers. "Because I see the same fight in you I saw in my boy. You're not running, you're clawing back." Time pressed too hard for debate. Lauren split the group. "Carter, Sarah's meeting us at the Northern Lights Motel with Trooper Bradley. Evidence is there, room 12. Take 12 people, get it done. I'll draw them off with the rest." She turned to Emily, kneeling despite the pain shooting through her leg. "You're going with Carter, kid. Sarah'll keep you safe." Emily's eyes widened, panic flaring. "No, I want to stay with you." Lauren cupped her face, her voice breaking. "You're my hope, Emily. My chance to give you what Ethan never got. Go, please." Tears spilled as Emily hugged her, a fierce, fleeting embrace, before Carter gently pulled her toward the van. Lauren grabbed Hank's shotgun, checking its load, 6 shells, enough for a distraction. "Got any propane tanks around?" she asked. Hank pointed to a stack in the corner. "Leftovers from the old heaters. Knock yourself out." She rigged a crude explosive with a timer, 5 minutes, her hands steady despite the blood slicking her fingers. Delta training made it second nature, even now. "Get them out," she told Carter, then limped back to the tunnel with 6 deportees, a mix of young men and a woman with a toddler, all willing to trust her. As the van's engine rumbled to life, Lauren set the timer and tossed the propane bundle toward the tunnel's mouth. "Move!" she barked, leading her group west through the snow, away from Carter's route. The explosion roared behind them, a fireball lighting the night, shaking snow from the trees. Red Talon would swarm it, buying Carter time if she judged right. Her shoulder screamed, her leg buckled with each step, but Emily's face kept her going. She'd lost Ethan to betrayal once. This time, she'd fight until her last breath. The Montana night erupted in a blaze of orange and black as the propane explosion tore through the tunnel behind Lauren Harper, the shockwave rattling the snow-laden pines and sending a plume of smoke curling into the blizzard. She stumbled forward, her 6-person team trailing behind, their boots crunching through the icy crust as they fled west. Her left shoulder was a furnace of pain, the bullet wound bleeding anew with every step, while her thigh screamed under the strain, blood soaking her jeans and freezing in crimson streaks. The shotgun old man Hank had given her hung heavy in her hands, its weight a lifeline she clutched despite the dizziness clouding her vision. Above, the storm howled, masking the distant shouts of Red Talon's men swarming toward the blast. Exactly as she'd planned. But the cost of that distraction gnawed at her. Emily's tear-streaked face as Carter drove her away, the echo of Ethan's loss in every beat of her faltering heart. Lauren led her group, a mix of young men and a woman cradling a toddler, toward an abandoned lumber mill she'd spotted on the maps, a mile out. "Keep moving," she rasped, her voice hoarse over the wind. The mill's silhouette emerged through the whiteout, its sagging roof and broken smokestacks a grim promise of shelter. She kicked open a rusted side door, waving them inside. The interior smelled of rot and sawdust, the floor littered with frozen debris, but it was defensible. High walls, narrow windows, a basement level for fallback. "Find cover," she ordered, limping to a shattered window to scout the perimeter. Her breath fogged the glass, her hands trembling as she gripped the shotgun. She'd given Carter a head start. Now it was about holding the line. Minutes ticked by in tense silence. The group huddled behind overturned tables and stacks of moldy planks. Then, a roar cut through the storm. An engine, low and guttural, followed by the rhythmic thump of rotor blades. Lauren's stomach dropped. She peered out, squinting against the snow, and saw it. A black helicopter slicing through the night, its searchlight stabbing the ground below. Not red talons. Its markings were sharper, silver claws emblazoned on the side. "Silver claws," she muttered, recognizing the rival cartel from intel briefings. They weren't here to help. They'd come to exploit the chaos, to snatch Red Talon's prize or bury them all. Before she could react, the chopper unleashed a barrage. Machine gun fire raked the mill, bullets punching through the walls, splintering wood and showering the group with debris. Screams erupted as Lauren dove for cover, dragging the woman and her toddler behind a steel beam. "Stay down!" she yelled, her voice nearly lost in the cacophony. The young men scrambled, one clutching his arm where a shard had sliced him. Then came a deeper boom. A rocket from the chopper slammed into the basement stairwell, the explosion collapsing it in a cloud of dust and twisted metal. Lauren's heart sank. 3 figures vanished under the rubble. An older man, a teenage boy, and the woman's sister, Emily's mother. "No!" the woman shrieked, lunging toward the wreckage, her toddler wailing in her arms. Lauren grabbed her, pulling her back as Emily's mother's hand reached out from the debris, then fell still. "She's gone," Lauren shouted, her voice cracking, tears stinging her eyes as she held the woman tight. The toddler's cries pierced her skull, a haunting echo of Ethan's last moments in Syria. She'd failed again. 3 lives snuffed out in seconds, and the guilt clawed at her like a living thing. The radio in her pack crackled, Carter's voice breaking through static. "Lauren, it's bad, Bradley's down. Silver Claws hit him en route. They've got the evidence." Lauren's blood ran cold, her grip on the shotgun faltering. "What?" she gasped, the words barely audible. "Victor Kane's here," Carter continued, his tone grim. "He's coordinating both crews, Red Talon and Silver Claws. We're holed up at the motel, but we're losing ground." The line cut out, leaving Lauren staring at the ruined stairwell, her world crumbling faster than the mill around her. Victor Kane, the name hit like a sledgehammer. Red Talon's kingpin, a ghost from her Delta days, the man who'd turned Syria into a slaughterhouse. He'd orchestrated Ethan's death, and now he held the evidence that could end him. Evidence she'd sent Carter to secure. The helicopter circled, its spotlight sweeping the mill, and Lauren knew they were trapped. "We're done," one of the young men muttered, his voice shaking. "They'll kill us all." Lauren's head spun, blood loss and despair warring within her. But Emily's face flashed in her mind, her promise to give the girl a future Ethan never had. "I'm staying," Lauren said, her voice steel despite the tremble in her limbs. She turned to the group, her eyes fierce. "You 3 find a way out through the east wall. Link up with Carter at the Northern Lights. Tell him to hold on." The woman with the toddler sobbed, clutching her child. "What about you?" Lauren forced a grim smile, hefting the shotgun. "I'm the bait. Kane wants a fight. I'll give him one." She shoved them toward a cracked window, then limped to the mill's center, rigging her last propane tank from Hank's stash with a makeshift fuse. 2 minutes. Her hands shook, blood slicking the metal, but her Delta training held firm. As the group slipped into the storm, she lit the fuse and staggered to a vantage point, shotgun ready. The chopper landed, disgorging Silver Claw's gunmen, while Red Talon's SUVs roared up from the west, Kane's forces uniting in a pincer move. Lauren fired, a shell blasting one man off his feet, the recoil jarring her wounded shoulder. Pain blurred her vision, but she reloaded, her breath ragged. "Come get me, you bastard," she muttered, picturing Kane's smug face. The propane tank detonated, a fireball engulfing the mill's west wing, scattering Kane's men in chaos. Lauren stumbled back, the heat singeing her skin, her legs buckling as blood pooled beneath her. She'd lost the evidence, lost 3 lives, and now faced an army alone. Ethan's voice whispered in her mind, "Mommy, help me," and tears mixed with the snow on her face. Hope was gone, but she'd fight until it killed her. For Emily, for Carter, for the chance to claw something back from this nightmare. The Montana blizzard roared like a living beast, its icy claws tearing at Lauren Harper as she crouched behind a charred beam in the smoldering ruins of the lumber mill. Flames from the propane explosion flickered against the snow, casting jagged shadows over the wreckage, while the wind carried the acrid stench of burning wood and metal. Her left shoulder was a bloody pulp, the bullet wound seeping through her jacket, and her thigh trembled under her weight, each breath a labored gasp. The shotgun in her hands was down to 2 shells, her Glock empty on the floor beside her, spent casings glinting in the firelight. Red Talon and Silver Claw's gunmen swarmed the perimeter, their shouts and gunfire a chaotic symphony in the storm. Lauren had drawn them here, away from Carter and Emily, but the cost was steep. 3 lives lost under the rubble, the evidence in Victor Kane's hands, and her own body breaking under the strain. Through the swirling snow, a figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the cold precision of a predator. Victor Kane stepped into the flickering glow, his black coat dusted with frost, a custom .45 pistol gleaming in his gloved hand. His face was hard, chiseled from years of war and crime, his dark eyes locking on Lauren with a mix of recognition and contempt. Well, he called, his voice cutting through the wind like a blade. "Lauren Harper, Delta's ghost. Should have known you'd crawl out of that truck." He smirked, holstering his gun as if she were no threat, his arrogance a taunt. Around him, a dozen men fanned out, rifles trained on her position, their boots crunching the ice. Lauren steadied her shotgun, her vision blurring from blood loss, but her resolve burned brighter than the flames. "Kane," she spat, her voice raw with hate. "You're the bastard who turned Syria into a graveyard. Ethan, my son, 8 years old, dead because of you." Kane's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of amusement. "Syria was business, Harper. Your kid was collateral, a message to Delta to stay out of my way. Guess you didn't get it." The words ripped through her, a fresh wound deeper than any bullet. She saw Ethan's broken body again, heard his last cry, and rage surged, steadying her aim despite the pain. Before she could fire, a small figure darted from the shadows. Emily, her dark hair whipping in the wind, her eyes wide with terror. "Miss Lauren, don't!" she screamed, stumbling toward her through the snow. Lauren's heart stopped. How had she gotten here? Carter was supposed to keep her safe at the motel. "Emily, get back!" Lauren shouted, her voice cracking as she lurched forward, shotgun slipping from her grasp. Kane's men raised their rifles, but he waved them off, his gaze shifting to the girl with a predator's curiosity. "Well, isn't this sweet?" he sneered. "Another kid to shield you, Harper? Won't save you this time." Emily threw herself at Lauren, wrapping her arms around her waist, sobbing into her blood-soaked jacket. "Don't kill him. I don't want you to be like them." Her plea echoed the innocence Lauren had lost with Ethan, a desperate mirror to her shattered soul. Tears streamed down Lauren's face, freezing on her cheeks as she held Emily close, her hands trembling. "I promised you a future, kid," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not this." Kane laughed, a harsh, grating sound, and drew his .45 again. "Touching, but I'm done with games. Step aside, girl, or you're both dead." Lauren pushed Emily behind her, shielding her with her body, her mind racing for a way out. She had no ammo, no strength, just a mother's instinct and a fading will to fight. Then, a shadow moved fast from the east. A man in tactical gear, blood trailing from a wound in his side, charging through the snow like a bull. Mike Sullivan, her old Delta teammate from Syria, slammed into Kane before he could fire, tackling him to the ground. "Lauren, run!" Sullivan roared, his voice ragged but fierce, wresting the gun from Kane's hand. The gunman opened fire, bullets kicking up snow as Lauren dragged Emily behind a fallen log, her wounded leg buckling under her. Sullivan fought like a man possessed, landing a brutal punch to Kane's jaw, but a silver-claws thug clubbed him from behind, sending him sprawling. Kane staggered up, blood dripping from his lip, and snarled, "Finish him!" Sullivan rolled onto his back, his eyes meeting Lauren's across the chaos, a look of resolve, of apology. "For Syria," he gasped, then yanked a grenade from his vest, pulling the pin as he lunged at Kane again. "For Ethan." The explosion was deafening, a blinding flash of light and heat that swallowed Kane and Sullivan in a fireball, hurling debris and bodies through the air. Lauren shielded Emily, the blast's force slamming them into the snow, her ears ringing as the storm swallowed the echoes. When the smoke cleared, Kane lay motionless, his coat shredded, blood pooling beneath him. Alive, but broken. Sullivan was gone, a charred crater marking his last stand, his sacrifice etched into the night. Lauren crawled to the edge, tears streaming as she stared at the void where her friend had been. "Mike!" she choked, her voice a sob, clutching Emily as the girl wept into her chest. Red Talon and Silver Claws survivors scattered, stunned by the blast, their coordination shattered. Lauren's strength faded, her blood staining the snow red, but she forced herself up, pulling Emily with her. "We've got to go," she whispered, her voice hollow, Sullivan's final words, "For Ethan," ringing in her ears. She'd lost another piece of herself, but Kane was down, and Emily was alive. Stumbling west through the blizzard, she clung to that fragile hope, her body failing but her will unbroken, driven by the ghosts of her past and the child at her side. The Montana blizzard raged on, a merciless wall of white that swallowed the night as Lauren Harper staggered through the snow, her arm wrapped tightly around Emily. Her left shoulder was a pulsing agony, blood seeping through her jacket and freezing in dark patches against her skin, while her thigh wound dragged her steps into a limping shuffle. The shotgun hung useless at her side, its last shell spent, and her Glock lay abandoned in the mill's wreckage. Behind them, the smoldering crater where Mike Sullivan had taken Victor Kane down glowed faintly through the storm, a testament to his sacrifice, and a fleeting hope that the nightmare might end. Emily's small hand clutched Lauren's, her sobs lost in the wind, her tear-streaked face pale against the blizzard's fury. Sullivan's final words, "For Ethan," echoed in Lauren's mind, a lifeline pulling her forward despite the exhaustion threatening to claim her. They'd made it half a mile west when the sound of engines cut through the storm, low, rumbling, and closing fast. Lauren's heart sank, her breath hitching as she scanned the trees. Red Talon or Silver Claws? She couldn't tell, but either way they were hunted. "Hide," she whispered, pushing Emily behind a snow-crusted pine, her body shielding the girl as headlights pierced the whiteout. Two black SUVs roared into view, tires crunching ice, followed by the faint whine of helicopter rotors. Lauren tensed, her hand fumbling for a knife in her boot, her last weapon. But then a voice crackled through a bullhorn, sharp and familiar. "Harper, it's Mitchell. Stand down. We've got you." Deputy Sarah Mitchell leapt from the lead SUV, her sheriff's parka dusted with snow, her service pistol drawn but lowered. Behind her, Montana National Guard Humvees rolled up, soldiers piling out with rifles at the ready, their faces grim under night vision goggles. Relief flooded Lauren, but it was short-lived. Emily darted from cover, running to Sarah with a cry. "Miss Lauren's hurt," she sobbed, tugging the deputy toward her. Sarah knelt beside Lauren, her blue eyes widening at the blood. "Jesus, Harper, you look like hell. Where's Carter?" "Northern Lights Motel," Lauren rasped, leaning against the tree as dizziness swamped her. "Kane's down." Sullivan took him out, but the evidence, Silver Claws got it. Bradley's hit. Sarah cursed under her breath, then waved a guardsman over. "Medic now." A young soldier rushed up, dropping a trauma kit beside Lauren. his hands quick as he cut away her sleeve to pack the shoulder wound. Pain flared, but Lauren gritted her teeth, her focus on Sarah. Carter's pinned. Get there fast. As the medic worked, the helicopter descended. A border patrol Black Hawk, its blades slicing the storm, landing lights cutting through the snow. Sarah grabbed her radio. Carter Mitchell status. Static hissed. Then James Carter's voice broke through, strained but alive. Motel's a war zone, silver claws everywhere. Bradley's alive, barely. They've got the evidence pouch, but I've got Emily and the others in a back room. Need extraction now? Sarah glanced at the chopper, then at Lauren. Border patrol's clean, National Guard's backing us. We're going in. Lauren pushed the medic off, staggering to her feet despite his protests. I'm coming, she growled, her voice thick with pain. Sarah grabbed her arm, eyes fierce. You're half dead, Harper. Sit this out. Lauren shook her off, her gaze locking on Emily, who clung to Sarah's leg. Not while she's in there. Not after Sullivan. The deputy hesitated, then nodded, respect flashing in her eyes. Fine, but you're riding shotgun. Literally. The Black Hawk lifted off, Lauren strapped into the co-pilot seat, a borrowed rifle across her lap, her wounds hastily bandaged. Below, the guards' Humvees raced toward the motel, a mile east, their headlights swallowed by the blizzard. The chopper banked hard, snow pelting the windshield, as the pilot, a grizzled vet named Hayes, called out, 3 minutes. Silver Claws have anti-air gear, brace for hell. Lauren's stomach churned, but her grip on the rifle steadied, Sullivan's sacrifice fueling her. She glanced at Emily, buckled in behind her, and murmured, We're getting you out, kid. The Northern Lights Motel emerged through the storm. A single-story sprawl of peeling paint and flickering neon, surrounded by Silver Claws SUVs and gunmen. Tracer rounds lit the night as Carter's group traded fire from a shattered window, their muzzle flashes desperate pinpricks against the cartel's onslaught. The chopper swooped low, its door gunner unleashing a hail of bullets, scattering the enemy as Lauren leaned out, picking off 2 shooters with precise shots despite her trembling arm. Pain blurred her vision, but she reloaded, her focus razor-sharp. On the ground, the guards stormed in, Humvees crashing through makeshift barricades, soldiers engaging Silver Claws in a brutal firefight. Sarah leapt from the chopper as it touched down, leading a squad to the back room. Lauren followed, half falling into the snow, her leg buckling as she dragged herself forward. Inside, Carter knelt beside a bloodied Tom Bradley, the trooper clutching his side, the evidence pouch miraculously still strapped to his chest. Got it back, Carter panted, nodding at Bradley. He took it off a Claws runner before passing out. Emily ran to Lauren, throwing her arms around her as Sarah secured the room. You came, the girl sobbed, her voice muffled against Lauren's chest. Lauren held her tight, blood smearing her hair, tears stinging her eyes. Always, kid. The chopper lifted off again, evacuating the group as the guard mopped up the last of Silver Claws. Lauren slumped against the wall, Bradley beside her, the evidence safe, for now. But as the Black Hawk climbed, a guardsman approached Sarah, his face grim. Found Harper in the snow a mile west, barely alive, clutching this. He held up Ethan's photo, crumpled and blood-stained. Lauren took it, her hands shaking, Sullivan's face flashing in her mind. She'd lost him, lost 3 others, but Emily and the evidence were secure. The storm raged outside, but for the first time, a flicker of light pierced her darkness. The sterile hum of the hospital room was a stark contrast to the howling Montana blizzard Lauren Harper had left behind, its walls a cold white that mirrored the snow she'd bled into hours ago. She lay propped against a stiff pillow, her left shoulder swathed in bandages, the bullet wound stitched but pulsing with a dull ache. Her thigh was wrapped tight, the gauze hiding the raw mess beneath, and an 4 dripped steadily into her arm, fighting the blood loss that had nearly claimed her. The room smelled of antiseptic and regret, the faint beep of a heart monitor counting out her survival. Beside her, Emily slept curled in a chair, her small hand clutching Lauren's photo of Ethan, crumpled, blood-stained, but whole. The girl's dark hair spilled over her face, her breathing soft, a fragile piece after the chaos they'd endured. Lauren's hazel eyes traced the photo, Ethan's grin cutting through the fog of painkillers. 4 years ago, Syria had taken him, 8 years old, caught in a Red Talon hit orchestrated by Victor Kane. Mike Sullivan's sacrifice had brought Kane down, his broken body now under guard in a locked ward 2 floors below. But the cost was a fresh wound carved into Lauren's soul. Sullivan, her Delta brother, her last link to that mission, had traded his life for hers, for Emily's, for a chance at justice. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead, tears slipping free, freezing her resolve into something brittle but unyielding. The door creaked open, and Deputy Sarah Mitchell stepped in. Her sheriff's parka swapped for a fleece jacket, her blue eyes tired but sharp. "You look like death warmed over, Harper," she said, a faint smile softening the words. She pulled up a chair, glancing at Emily. "She wouldn't leave your side, kept asking if you'd wake up." Lauren swallowed hard, her throat tight. "She's a fighter," she murmured, her voice rough, "like her mom was." The memory of Emily's mother, buried under the mill's rubble, twisted the knife deeper. Another life she couldn't save. Sarah leaned forward, her tone shifting to business. "Carter and Bradley made it. Bradley's in surgery, but he'll pull through. The evidence pouch is with the Montana Rangers now. Chain of custody locked tight. Kane's singing like a damn canary. Named Brooks, half the sheriff's department, even a state rep. Red Talon's crumbling as we speak." Lauren nodded, relief warring with exhaustion, but her gaze stayed on Ethan's photo. "Sullivan, he made that happen," she said, her voice breaking. "He took Kane out for me, for Ethan." Sarah's expression softened, a shadow crossing her face. "I heard about Syria from Carter, your son. I lost my brother to Red Talon 3 years back, border ambush. I get it, Lauren. Why you fought so hard." The shared pain hung between them, a quiet bond forged in loss. Lauren wiped her eyes, forcing a breath. "Doesn't bring them back," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But maybe it stops the next one." A knock interrupted them. Captain John Carter, Lauren's old Delta commander, stepped in, his gray hair cropped short, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. His weathered face held a mix of pride and concern as he took in her battered form. "Ghost 6, he said, using her old call sign, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Heard you took down a cartel kingpin single-handed." "Well, almost." Lauren snorted, wincing as it jarred her shoulder. "Sullivan did the heavy lifting. I just bled a lot." John's smile faded, his tone turning serious. "Kane's testimonies already netting 27 indictments, ICE sheriffs, even a senator. The evidence you saved is rewriting the border game. SOC's offering you a spot back. Full operational freedom, your own team. Ghost 6 could run dark ops, clean up this mess for good." He paused, studying her. "What do you say?" Lauren's gaze drifted to Emily, then to Ethan's photo, her mind a storm of memories. Syria's dust, Sullivan's last stand, the weight of every life she'd lost or saved. She shook her head, her voice firm despite the tremble. "Not SOC's way. I'll fight, John, my rules, my team. No bureaucracy, no collateral stats. I'm done losing kids to this crap." John raised an eyebrow, but nodded, respect glinting in his eyes. "Fair enough. Call it when you're ready. Ghost 6 days on the books." He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. National Guard found this in the snow where they picked you up." He handed her a small baseball, scuffed and faded. "Ethan's, lost in Syria," somehow carried back to her. Lauren's breath caught, her fingers closing around it as tears welled again. Sarah stood, giving her space, but Emily stirred, blinking awake. "Miss Lauren?" she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. Lauren forced a smile, tucking the baseball under her pillow. "Hey kid, you're safe now." Emily climbed onto the bed, curling into Lauren's side despite the bandages, her small arms wrapping around her. "You came back for me?" she whispered, her voice thick with awe. Lauren hugged her close, blood and tears mingling on her skin. "Always," she choked, her voice breaking as she pressed Ethan's photo into Emily's hand. "Keep this for me, okay? You're my second chance." The girl nodded, tears spilling as she clutched the photo, a silent promise between them. Sarah watched, her own eyes glistening, then stepped out, leaving them alone. Lauren stared at the ceiling, Sullivan's face flashing in her mind. His grin in Syria, his final roar in the snow. She'd lost him, lost Ethan, lost too many. But Emily's warmth against her was a lifeline, a fragile hope she'd cling to. John's offer lingered, a chance to fight on, not as a soldier, but as a protector, her way. The storm outside had quieted, but inside, Lauren's war was far from over. The crisp March air at Arlington National Cemetery carried a whisper of spring, a faint warmth cutting through the chill as Lauren Harper stood before 3 gravestones, her boots sinking slightly into the damp grass. Her left shoulder ached under a sling, the stitches pulling with every breath, and her thigh throbbed beneath a brace, but she stood tall, her hazel eyes fixed on the names etched in stone. Ethan Harper, her son, lost in Syria 4 years ago. Mike Sullivan, her Delta brother, gone in the Montana snow, and beside them, a marker for the unnamed civilians she'd failed to save that day. Ghosts of a mission rewritten by truth. The hospital had released her 3 weeks ago, her body patched but her soul still raw, and now she faced them, a silent reckoning under a sky streaked with dawn's gold. In her hand, she held Ethan's baseball, scuffed, faded, a relic returned to her by the National Guard, found clutched in her fist as she bled out in the blizzard. She'd carried it through the storm, through Sullivan's sacrifice, through the chaos that brought Victor Kane to justice. Now, she knelt, her fingers trembling as she placed it gently against Ethan's stone, its small weight a bridge to the boy she'd lost. "I tried, kid," she whispered, her voice cracking, tears spilling hot down her cheeks. "I couldn't save you, but I fought for you, I swear." The wind rustled the trees, a soft sigh that felt like his answer, and she pressed her palm to the cold granite, a mother's prayer in silence. A small hand slipped into hers, and Lauren looked down to see Emily beside her, the girl's dark eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She'd come with Lauren from Montana, granted temporary asylum as a material witness against Red Talon. Her mother's death a shadow she carried too young. "He'd be proud of you," Emily said, her voice soft but sure, clutching Ethan's photo, crumpled, blood-stained, a treasure Lauren had entrusted to her in the hospital. Lauren's throat tightened, and she pulled Emily close, her good arm wrapping around her slight frame. "You think so?" she murmured, her voice thick. Emily nodded against her chest. "You saved me. That's what heroes do." Footsteps crunched behind them, and Captain John Carter approached, his gray hair catching the morning light, his uniform swapped for a dark coat. He stopped a respectful distance away, his weathered face somber as he took in the scene. "Morning, Ghost 6, he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Thought I'd find you here." Lauren wiped her eyes, standing slowly with Emily's help, her gaze shifting to him. "Had to say goodbye," she said, her voice steadying. "Properly this time." John nodded, glancing at the graves. Classified files got amended. Syria's on record now as a cartel hit, not a Delta failure. Ethan, Sullivan, the others, they're heroes, not footnotes. You made that happen. Lauren's chest tightened, a weight lifting she hadn't known she carried. For 4 years, she'd borne the guilt of that day. Ethan's death a stain on her soul, Sullivan's loss a fresh scar. Now the truth stood bare, and it hurt, but it healed too. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Kane's testimony sealed it. 27 indictments and counting. ICE's dirty laundry's airing out. Red Talon's infrastructure's toast. The evidence you and Carter saved, it's a damn avalanche. Rangers handed it to justice yesterday. They're calling it the biggest anti-corruption bust in a decade. Lauren's lips twitched, a faint smile breaking through. "Sullivan's grenade did the trick," she said, her tone bittersweet. "And Bradley's stubborn ass holding onto that pouch." John chuckled, then grew serious. "The offer stands, Ghost 6, your terms. Sox greenlit a task force. Off the books ops, your pick of the litter. Carter's back in Canada, heading a new anti-cartel unit. Mitchell's signed on with the Rangers corruption squad. Says she's got your number if you call. He paused, studying her. What's your play, Lauren? She looked at Emily, then at Ethan Stone, her mind turning over the past week. The hospital, Kane's capture, the lives she'd pulled from the storm. I'm in, she said, her voice firm. But it's my team, my rules, no kids in the crossfire, no red tape. Ghost 6 runs lean and mean. Done, John said, no hesitation, a spark of pride in his eyes. Who's your first pick? Lauren glanced at Emily, then back at him. Mitchell, she's got fire. We'll start there. He nodded, turning to go, but added, Fort Bliss has the deportees, Emily included. Asylum's pending, but their testimonies locked down. You did right by them. Lauren exhaled, a knot loosening in her chest as he walked away, leaving her with the girl who'd become her anchor. Emily tugged her hand, pointing at Sullivan Stone. He saved us, didn't he? Lauren knelt again, her fingers brushing the granite, tears welling fresh. Yeah, kid, he did. She placed her hand over Emily's, guiding it to the stone. And you saved me, gave me a reason to keep going. Emily's eyes glistened, and she hugged Lauren tight, a silent vow between them. The sun climbed higher, its light spilling over the cemetery, bathing the graves in gold. A promise of something new, something worth fighting for. Lauren stood, Emily at her side, and took one last look at the stones. Rest easy, boys, she whispered, her voice steady now, a fire rekindling in her gut. Red Talon was down, but the war wasn't over. Silver claws lurked, and the border bled with corruption still. Ghost 6 was back, not for glory, but for the ones she'd lost, and the ones she'd sworn to protect. With Emily's hand in hers, she turned toward the light, ready to face whatever came next. The sun broke through the thinning clouds over Arlington National Cemetery, its golden rays spilling across the rows of white gravestones as Lauren Harper walked away from Ethan's resting place. Her steps slow but resolute. Emily's small hand nestled in hers, the girl's dark hair catching the light, a quiet strength in her grip that anchored Lauren against the ache of her healing wounds. Her left shoulder, still slung, throbbed beneath the weight of her jacket, and her braced thigh protested with each stride, but the pain was a dull echo now, a reminder of the storm she'd survived, not a chain holding her back. The baseball she'd left on Ethan's grave glinted in the morning glow, a piece of her past laid to rest, while Mike Sullivan's sacrifice and Emily's survival fueled the fire flickering back to life in her chest. The blizzard was behind them, but the war ahead loomed large, and Lauren was ready. Emily glanced up, her brown eyes bright despite the shadows they'd carried from Montana. Where are we going now, Miss Lauren? She asked, her voice soft but curious, Ethan's crumpled photo tucked safely in her pocket. Lauren squeezed her hand, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Somewhere safe for you, kid, Fort Bliss for now. Then, wherever the fight takes me. Emily nodded, a solemn understanding passing between them, a bond forged in blood and snow. Lauren's heart swelled. Emily wasn't Ethan, couldn't replace him, but she was a second chance, a reason to keep going when the darkness threatened to swallow her whole. They reached the cemetery's edge, where a black SUV waited, its engine idling softly. Captain John Carter leaned against the hood, his gray hair ruffling in the breeze, his coat open to reveal a holstered sidearm, a soldier's habit he'd never shed. Thought you'd slip out quiet, he said, his tone dry but warm, a smirk playing on his lips. Lauren shrugged her good shoulder, wincing slightly. Not my style, John. You know that. He chuckled, then straightened, his expression shifting to the clipped efficiency she remembered from Delta briefings. Got an update. Thought you'd want it before you vanish. Lauren raised an eyebrow, her hand resting on Emily's shoulder as the girl pressed close. Spill it, she said, her voice steady but edged with curiosity. John crossed his arms, his gaze flicking to the horizon. Kane's locked down, max security, singing louder every day. Justice is tearing through Red Talon's network. 27 indictments turned into 42 overnight. Brooks is toast. Half the IC field office is under investigation, and that senator's lawyering up fast. Your evidence. Carter's chip, Bradley's pouch. It's a goddamn wrecking ball. Lauren's lips twitched, a grim satisfaction settling in her gut. Good, she said simply, picturing Sullivan's grin as the cartel crumbled. John's eyes narrowed, a shadow crossing his face. But Silver Claws, they're moving in. Kane's fall left a vacuum, and they're filling it quick. Word's out they've got a new player calling shots, someone tied to Syria, deep cover, maybe ex-military. Chatter's thin, but it's got a familiar ring. Lauren's breath caught, her mind flashing to Damascus. The dust, the screams, Ethan's broken bat beside him. Red Talon wasn't alone back then, she murmured, her voice low, a chill creeping up her spine. Someone else pulled strings. Kane was just the face. John nodded, his jaw tight. Could be. You in to find out? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Lauren glanced down at Emily, the girl's innocent gaze meeting hers, then back at John. I'm in, she said, her tone steel. Ghost 6 my way, lean team, no red tape, straight to the heart. Mitchell's my first call. She's got the guts for this. John smirked, a spark of approval in his eyes. Knew you'd say that. She's waiting, Rangers gave her your number. Carter's feeding intel from Canada. Silver Claws won't see you coming. He paused, then added, Fort Bliss has Emily covered. Lawyers are pushing asylum hard. She's got a shot at a real life. Emily tugged Lauren's sleeve, her voice small but fierce. You're gonna fight the bad guys again, right? Lauren knelt, wincing as her leg protested, and cupped Emily's face, her good hand steady. Yeah, kid. For you, for Ethan, for everyone they've hurt. But you're my light now. Keep shining, okay? Emily's eyes welled, and she threw her arms around Lauren's neck, a sob breaking free. I will, I promise. Lauren held her tight, tears stinging her own eyes, the warmth of the embrace a balm against the cold of her past. John cleared his throat, giving them a moment before stepping forward. Wheels up in 2 hours, Fort Bliss, then wherever you point us. Ghost SAXS live. Your call sign, your rules. Lauren stood, Emily clinging to her side, and met his gaze with a fire she hadn't felt in years. Copy that, she said, her voice firm, a smile breaking through, small, fierce, unbroken. I never stopped, John. Not really. He nodded, a soldier's salute in his eyes, and opened the SUV door for them. As they climbed in, the sun climbed higher, its light washing over the cemetery, casting long shadows that danced with the breeze. Emily pressed against Lauren, her small hand tracing Ethan's photo, a silent vow to carry his memory. The engine roared to life, and the SUV rolled out, leaving Arlington behind, the graves glowing in the dawn. A farewell and a beginning. Lauren's mind turned to Silver Claws, to the shadow from Syria, to the fight ahead. Ghost 6 was operational again, not for revenge but for redemption. For the innocents still out there, for the girl beside her, for the son she'd lost. The road stretched north, the storm a memory, the light ahead a promise. Lauren glanced at Emily, then out the window, her voice a whisper only the wind could hear. We're just getting started, kid. The SUV vanished into the horizon, a lone figure against the vastness, carrying the weight of the past and the hope of a future she'd carve with her own hands.